We'll get started. Thanks again for coming this evening. Welcome to all of you. It's really great to have you here, and especially on such a nice spring evening. Again, we're right before winter returns for a couple days. But anyway, tonight we're here to talk about transportation at the Crossroads, and are we ready? Couple other just housekeeping things. The restrooms are just out the back. On your tables, there are cards for questions. So if you think of a question while you're listening to the speakers, just jot that down, and then we'll collect the cards, and then Lori will be asking the questions of the speakers. So take a second to write those questions down. It's great to have Lori Sternovit from the Minneapolis Star-Trib here this evening. She'll be the moderator, and she'll be introducing the speakers. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you, John, and it's good to be here with all of you tonight to talk about what I consider the premier issue of the 2016 legislative session. Some Minnesotans actually would say transportation in the state is pretty good. Could be worse. That's in the Minnesota vernacular. Some folks apparently aren't convinced that we have a problem. I have a hunch that all of you are here tonight because you're not in that category. I'd like to invite those who might, though, still think, well, we could get by without doing much on transportation for this year or a while longer. I'd like them to think about 5 things I see coming from my vantage at this editorial page at the Star Tribune that may change their minds. There are 5 forces kind of coming at us that I was able to identify as I thought about how Minnesota's transportation picture might be changing. The big one, the obvious one, is growth of the metropolitan area. Since the end of the Great Recession, virtually all of the growth in Minnesota has happened in the metropolitan area, and that's just going to keep on. The forecast is that we will have another 500,000 people, 500,000 people in the metro area by 2030, just 14 years from now. That's a major force. How are we going to accommodate the transportation needs of that many more people? But aging is another big force. All of those boomers aren't babies anymore. They're seniors, and they're going to be folks who really need, for the sake of all of us, for their own well-being and for the sake of all of us who help finance the systems of our lives, they're going to need to stay in their own homes as long as possible, stay independent as long as possible, and transit, available options to driving, will be important for them. That's the change force number 2. Number 3 is one I don't think we talk about very much, and that is the changing transportation preferences of the millennial generation. I'm a mom of 3 millennials. 2 of them live in Uptown in Minneapolis because that's where the transit is. That's really why they're there. They prefer not to invest in a car at this stage in their lives. They're both in their mid-20s. Because while they could afford it with the jobs that they have, they would rather spend their money on other things, like saving for a house or paying down those student loans. So what they tell me is that that's very typical among their friends. Owning a car isn't what it used to be for that generation, and that preference could last for a good long time for them. The 4th change I see coming just has to do with the fact that things that were all new at the same time in Minnesota all are getting old at the same time. And I'm not talking about people here, I'm talking about bricks and mortar infrastructure. We built a lot of new infrastructure in the years between 1960 and 1980 in the state. It's all getting old and needs replacing at about the same time. And you see the evidence, the wages of that as you drive around the metro area. The 5th factor is another one I'm not sure we talk about enough, and that is in a global economy, what's going on in other metropolitan areas matters more to us, to our own well-being economically, to our own ability to attract workers in a time of national worker shortage, which we seem to be heading into. Keeping up with the competition is going to matter more for our success as a metropolitan area going forward. So with all of that in mind, what should Minnesota's next transportation move be? We have a bill in conference committee. We have opportunities this year. We have some information studies that were done in 2012 that say that we need at least a $7 billion investment over the next 10 years, maybe up to a $12 billion investment over the next 10 years, just to keep pace with where we are today, not to mention how to keep up with the competition. So tonight we have a good panel to begin to answer that question. What should Minnesota's next move, transportation move, be? I'll start with Jan Lucky. If it has to do with transportation in Washington County, Jan Lucky is involved. She is the county's transit and planning manager, which is a job with multimodal range and a full calendar, attending to both inside the county matters and representing the county on state and regional boards and committees. Jan came to Washington County from the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota, a fine place. She's a graduate of St. Olaf College and holds a master's degree in public administration from Hamline University. Welcome, Jan. Get us started, please.
Thank you, Lori, for the great introduction, and I may be able to stick to my time limit because you highlighted many key points that my presentation will build on. Thank you. So I'm going to, you can actually go right to the second slide. Thank you. I'm going to provide an overview of the transit corridors that are in the planning stages in Washington County, 2 key highway corridors, and I'm going to touch on the comprehensive plan, the 2040 comprehensive plan, which we'll be embarking on in the near future. So this is a map of the Regional Transitway Vision. It was actually developed by the county's Transit Improvement Board, which funds 30 to 80% of transitway expansion in our region. 4 transitways cross into Washington County, moving from north to south. And let me grab the pointer here. Is the Rush Lane corridor, Highway 36, which is the gray on this map here, Gateway, and Red Rock. Despite these plans, the Twin Cities region is falling behind other metropolitan areas when it comes to investing in transitway corridors. Here's the size of our transitway system, this green circle right here. It represents the Green Line, the Blue Line, and North Star commuter rail. Now compare that to other regions in the United States. It's a little bit hard to see, but here's Dallas, St. Louis, Salt Lake. As Lori noted, these are regions that we are competing against for development, employers, talent, millennial talent, all of which are demanding more travel options. Minnesota is #1 in a lot of things, but we are not #1 in transit. We are behind, particularly in the East Metro. To do this will take determination and investments to catch up. And catch up we must. The goal is not to do away with cars. The goal is to provide options for our changing demographics, particularly millennials. We are trying to attract and retain in our state and seniors with growing mobility needs. Doug Stang, 3M Vice President, recently told the Gateway Corridor Commission that it's critical to 3M's ability to attract young talent because they are facing 30% of their workforce retiring in the next 5 years. This is an image, I'm going to go back one, of the proposed Gateway Corridor station. Oops, there we go, on the 3M campus. And then you can just go to the next slide. It's okay. The Gateway Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit, I'll touch on that corridor first. It is the Minnesota's first dedicated busway proposed. It is traveling between downtown St. Paul and Woodbury. You'll see here that east of 694, we're working to define the alignment, but the mode that's been chosen is bus rapid transit, and that is the result of due diligence of over 550 public meetings that have been held since 2010, including 10 neighborhood meetings here in Oakdale that have been held in the last 90 days. This service will include 13 stations running in both directions, and it will complement, not compete with express bus service, which runs only in one direction in the morning and the evening, mainly serving downtown commuters. And all of the corridors that are being studied in Washington County, 2 have selected bus rapid transit, Gateway and Red Rock, and the others are including that in their studies. This is an image of bus rapid transit, and I'll just take a moment to talk about what that looks like, because dedicated busway is new to Minnesota. It looks very much like light rail vehicles on wheels, and it runs in its own lane. The riders would pay on the platform, doors would open wide, people would walk or roll on and off very quickly, and it's about half the cost of light rail, but provides the same fast, convenient, and premium service. So the next corridor, Red Rock, and these corridors are being presented in order of where they are more or less in their planning stages. The Gateway corridor is furthest along. Red Rock is very close behind. Like the Gateway corridor, the Red Rock corridor is seeing travel patterns and personal preferences shift. People are moving in all directions at all times of day for education, recreation, jobs. They want frequent and reliable access through their corridor. So the Red Rock Corridor Commission has recently shifted its focus on how to best move people within and in between cities in their corridor, and a result of that work is this map, which was recently adopted. It's a proposed 30-mile bus rapid transit project along Highway 61 between Union Depot and St. Paul, connecting to Hastings, where it says Hastings number 2 is the Dakota County Government Center. And like the Gateway Corridor, outreach has driven a lot of the decision-making thus far. This summer, the Red Rock Corridor Commission will be completing an implementation plan that will outline the various phases of future development and construction of the Red Rock Corridor. It'll be based on technical data, policy, public input. These are images of a few of the more recent Red Rock Corridor public meetings. And this slide was provided by Anderson Windows. They testified on behalf of the Red Rock Corridor last session, and they are planning a $38 million expansion to their facility in Cottage Grove, and that will add an additional 200 jobs to their facility. And they have noted, or they testified, that they are having difficulty recruiting talent, recruiting workers for those jobs because there is no option to reach their facility by transit, and they are recruiting a demographic that is very dependent and interested in using transit to get to work. Rush Line it's coming right behind Red Rock. It's in the early planning stages. It's going to be looking at this summer, so stay tuned and watch for public meetings, open house announcements. In this corridor that roughly follows Highway 61 or 35E, it's looking at bus rapid transit or light rail transit on a varied number of different alignments, and they're really looking for public input right now to define their next phase of study. But Washington County isn't all just about transit. We have a lot of road projects too, and I won't be able to cover them all tonight. But on your map, on your table, is a map of the county's, Washington County's 5-year capital improvement plan. This plan for 2016 and the 5-year plan is our largest capital improvement plan for roads in Washington County's history. I think we say that every year, but that is because the demand and the infrastructure and the preservation needs that Lori highlighted are really becoming a critical issue for the county and a top priority. I'm just going to highlight 2 highway corridors that are touching the St. Croix River Valley. Highway 36, all of you I'm sure know very well. It's a vital principal arterial serving the north and northeast Twin Cities. The St. Croix River crossing will open in 2017. This map is a little bit hard to read, but every sort of icon on this map represents an at-grade intersection or an interchange. So the red stars are interchanges or at-grade intersections that have been converted to interchanges. English Street, Hilton Trail most recently. But there's a need to address this mobility and safety in this corridor as a whole. So one of the county's priorities is to look at the remaining at-grade intersections. This red dot here represents Hadley. It's the only at-grade intersection right now that is currently funded for conversion to an interchange. The 3 other white dots, this is Century, one of the most dangerous intersections in our state. This is Manning, Lake Elmo Avenue. They all are in the early study phase, but in need of funding to to make improvements to those intersections. And this corridor has also been identified by the Metropolitan Council as a high priority corridor for bus rapid transit. So in addition to the mobility and safety improvements seen in the corridor, converting these intersections is helping the corridor become transit ready. I also like to highlight 494, 694, 94 interchange. This is an interchange that we hear a lot about through the city of Woodbury, through elected officials. They hear about it from their constituents. Many people have found that there's congestion at this interchange and safety concerns. And we heard from residents who actually exit at 10th Street to try to avoid using that interchange to reach Woodbury. So we've been working really closely with MnDOT. They have planned some low-cost upgrades to make some improvements to that interchange, but it largely will stay the same due to funding limitations. Merged lanes will be changed for better traffic flow. These improvements are coming in the next year. The southbound or the eastbound loop will be reconfigured to better accommodate truck traffic, which there's been some rollovers at that interchange. But really, to do what's needed at that interchange long term, it's a $125 million or more investment, and it's a significant statewide investment, which is not currently included in any state plans. So lastly, I'll touch on the comprehensive plan. Every 4 or so years, we update our comprehensive plan, but this year is going to be a big year. And that is because there are critical needs that Lori touched on in her opening remarks, but also we're just starting to think about transportation, transit, roadways, bike, ped differently in more of a multimodal context. So this plan will be very different than any plan that the county has led before. And partly that's taking cues from the state agencies, MnDOT and Met Council, of what they're looking for in those plans. So this is just kind of a heads up to stay tuned, because there's going to be a robust public engagement process around that plan. This highlights some of the chapters that we'll be working on, and we'll begin in 2016 with a deadline of 2018. So on behalf of Washington County, I'd just like to say thank you for being here, and other sort of highlights of the remarks are included in this brochure too, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them later.
Thank you, Jan, for that good overview. And now we're going to hear from a business perspective. Roger Green, welcome. Roger has the business hat on our panel tonight, and that he's representing the Woodbury Chamber of Commerce. And it's probably not the first time you've had to represent the Woodbury Area Chamber of Commerce in a conversation about transportation. He's a past president of the Chamber, and he has been involved in recent years as a chamber volunteer developing support for the Gateway Project, which is also known as the Gold Line. He's had a long career with Health East Care System, retiring as Vice President of Strategy, Policy, Marketing, and Communications in 2012. While you were in that role, he was Health East liaison to the project we now call the Green Line. So you know a little bit about light rail as well. Roger, would you like me to bring you the microphone, or would you prefer to stand up here? Why don't you come up here? Okay, very good. Welcome.
You bet. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be part of tonight's discussion of what is, I think, one of the region's most exciting and important transportation opportunities. As one who has lived and worked on the east side of the metropolitan area for more than 40 years, I firmly believe that transportation development on this side of the river has played second fiddle to the west metro area for too long. The Gateway Corridor is a critical next step in developing that transportation network, and it is an innovative application of the bus rapid transit modality. Over the last year, I've had the privilege of speaking in support of Gateway Corridor on behalf of the Woodbury Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber early on adopted a resolution to support funding for the Gateway Corridor. Recognizing the growth taking place in Woodbury and surrounding communities, the Chamber has been a strong supporter of a vibrant mass transit corridor in the East Metro area, dating back to our support of Central Corridor in 2008. But the Woodbury Chamber is not the only business voice endorsing Gateway Corridor. The East Side Area Business Association, the Oakdale Business and Professional Association, and the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce have all participated in Gateway planning.
We've had numerous individual business representatives and business development managers who have also been at the table. So why, you might ask, would area businesses who are generally pretty cautious about endorsing major investments in public resources be supporting one of the larger infrastructure investments on this side of town? Well, my slide tells the story succinctly. I'm sure you can't read it from where you're sitting, but it comes straight off the Gateway Corridor website. You can take a look at it when you get home. Matt Kramer, president of the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, says it very well. Connecting the East Metro to downtown St. Paul and the region's transit system is great for business. Transit in the Gateway Corridor will provide new opportunities for economic development and a critical link for employees commuting to their workplace. Dave Johnson from Crossroads Properties echoes those sentiments. He says transit will bring people out from St. Paul into the suburbs for work and vice versa. It's really that simple. When I was checking in recently with Barbara Chichito Warren, the Woodbury Area Chamber of Commerce president, she said, it's all about workers and jobs. Gateway will provide a reliable way for people to get to Woodbury to work and to depart Woodbury to other work locations. It's hard to imagine another project that is as well positioned for success as the Gateway Corridor. In 2014, we had $33 million of commercial investment and more than 80 new businesses in Woodbury alone. 2015 easily eclipsed the 2014 development activity. Thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of residents are going to be added in Woodbury over the next 2 decades, adding to the volume of commuters both to and from Woodbury. The current development taking place at City Place, the former State Farm property in Woodbury, is probably the most visible evidence of our community's development and redevelopment. That State Farm property sat empty for 8 years. And during that time, there were 2 prospective developers who shied away from the project because it lacked easy access to transit. State Farm itself, in choosing its last 3 regional headquarters elsewhere in the country, has placed a high priority on good access to public transportation. It reflects a clear strategy to attract and retain talent who increasingly want to live and work in locations connected by transit. A State Farm executive said that their decisions are directly tied to the nearby availability of light rail and other transportation options that are attractive to recruiting talent. The current express bus system originating in Woodbury is heavily used, beyond capacity. This demonstrates our citizens' willingness to use mass transit already today. Gateway Corridor will expand these commuters' options and will provide increased frequency of transportation, making this mass transit option even more attractive. During the process, an innovative health impact assessment has taken place for Gateway Corridor. It's been a genuinely unique opportunity to leverage the benefits of the project beyond the mass transit dimension. Now, global evidence of the effectiveness of bus rapid transit has existed for many years. This mode of transportation is much more common in European countries. A couple of studies in the last decade indicate that those who have been early adopters of this modality in the United States have also enjoyed economic development and workforce advantages. A national study of BRT development and outcomes by the National Institute for Transportation and Communities concluded, quote, BRT station areas were associated with the largest positive shift in the share of upper wage jobs during economic recovery. We conclude that BRT systems are associated with positive development and job location outcomes. And I would be remiss if I didn't interject an additional consideration as one of those baby boomers with a millennial daughter. We baby boomers think, with good reason of course, that we are running the world right now, but that condition won't last for long. In 2015, the millennial generation was projected to surpass the size of the baby boomer generation. And as I'm sure you've all noticed, these young people that we raised think and act differently than we do. Many of them are living in urban settings today for easy access to jobs, shopping, entertainment, and their use of mass transit and bicycles far exceeds that of us baby boomers. When Marriott was developing in the Washington, D.C. region, they felt they had to have a location near the metro. I think, as with many other things, our younger folks are more inclined to be metro accessible and more urban, said Arnie Sorensen, Marriott's chief executive. As this generation matures and becomes the workforce of the future and leaders of our businesses, effective transportation like bus rapid transit will be critical for our East Metro communities. I look forward to hearing the rest of our panelists and to engaging in discussion with you after the panel has had its say. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Let me remind this audience that you have an opportunity to ask a question by filling out a card. I hope you're doing that as you think of questions, as you hear from our panelists tonight. We'll move along to our next panelist, Tom Cook. Tom, you're here tonight to bring an academics perspective. Tom is a special assistant to the president at Metropolitan State University. He directs government relations for that institution, and he's been at Metropolitan State. I learned to say Metropolitan State, not Metro State. Metropolitan State since 2000. Prior to that, he worked at the University of Minnesota, serving in several administrative capacities. I hope he's here to tell us what difference transportation will make to his university and other schools in this area. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori, for that introduction. I want to just paint you a brief picture tonight about our students and our institution, because I think they're sort of the canary in the coal mine, and teach a larger lesson about the region and the advantage of transit for them. I noticed that my boss's picture was up there on one of Roger's slides below Matt Kramer, so he's already been here, and bring greetings from the university. I'm also on the Policy Advisory Committee for the Gateway Corridor Commission, so I've had a chance to get learned up in short order on transit. Metropolitan State, first, if we could go to the second slide, this is a graphic that's on the Gateway Corridor website you may have seen before, and in two sections it shows the length of the whole line. The yellow dot in the top left, the yellow star, I'm sorry, is where our main Dayton's Bluff or St. Paul campus is. It's 3 blocks from the Mariah and 3rd Street stop, so that'll be a real change for our students. Currently, we serve the whole metropolitan area, although this is our main state-owned site, and our students drive at a rate of 93% of our total students. So it might sound like they prefer driving, but whenever we or the Student Senate scrape together enough money to offer subsidized bus passes, they sell out yesterday, every time. So there's an untapped, an unmet need there. Students drive when they have to, I think, is the lesson there. And I too have a couple of millennials in my family, and they have a real bias against driving. They both have cars, but my son, who travels for his work regularly, has never taken a car to the airport. He'll go out of his way to take transit. So, a couple of other things about just the corridor map there. If you look at a legislative map laid over that, there are about 5 Senate districts that touch the route or are within a moderate walk of it. And so, by definition, those districts have a population of about 400,000 people that close to that line. We track our students by a legislative district, and in those same 5 districts, we have about 4,000 of our students. That's really a conservative number of the number of folks, conservative estimate, who might use that line. Of course, it goes west from St. Paul as well as part of a network. So the potential for lowering the number of cars coming to our campus, as to many work sites, is significant. We recently built a parking ramp at the direction of the city. They were quite right. We were adding buildings and bringing more students and faculty to campus, and those cars shouldn't be in the neighborhoods. So our students and some employees are now paying off bonds for that parking ramp through their parking fees. So again, in a world with more transit, that's an expense in addition to the expense of owning a car that many of them could avoid. And of course, when you're a student, there's never enough money. Let's see. I want to make the point, too, that many people could be up here representing higher education. You're probably all familiar with Globe College, Rasmussen College. Students along this corridor might be going to St. Paul College. By making a couple of connections, they might go to Inver Hills or Century College, where we also offer programs. Concordia, University of Minnesota, if they make one transfer, they're on the Green Line and close to many other institutions. We, like many of our sister colleges, offer instruction mornings, afternoons, and evenings. So again, a line that doesn't just go twice a day, but is all day and frequent, is really necessary for students who In our case, and in many, are not the traditional 18-year-olds. Our average student's age, as you'll see in a minute, is 32 years. They have jobs, families, mortgages, many of them, a lot of stops to make in the day. So transit would really simplify their life journey. If we could go to the next one, Mike. Just a real quick survey of some of the kinds of programs, both liberal arts and professional, that students come to an institution like Metropolitan State for. These are folks often who are in a career and seeking to advance it, or changing careers, or in some cases preparing for a first career. So they have, again, many responsibilities in addition to going to class, and how they get there makes a big difference. That first slide is undergraduate programs, and the next one just shows some of our graduate program menus. So again, you can fill in the blanks about the lives and the responsibilities of people in programs like those. We also, really transit's important when there's a dense network, because people have to make multiple trips and transfers. In many cases, we have about 30 instructional sites across the 7-county region, and many of them branching out from St. Paul. The final slide just gives some high-level demographic information about our students. A little under 12,000 students now, 64% part-time, which means they're working often full-time. Most of the others are too, and they should do more homework, but 38% of our students currently are from our communities of color, and that's growing every year. And if you spend time around demographers at all, and it's hard not to in a state like this that's hungry for information, you know that over the next 16 years or so, virtually all of the incremental population growth in the state will be from communities of color. The majority population will be just about flat. And so as was just mentioned, as boatloads of baby boomers are retiring, for some of us 70 is the new 60, but many are retiring, the population that really needs to both get skilled up, because those retirees are taking their degrees with them when they go. And so we need folks of comparable preparation, really need to come from those communities which, as it happens, have been historically underserved in higher education. So it's important for them to get in large numbers into that pipeline, get the same preparation, and they do so at Metropolitan State and many of our sister institutions. You'll see there that they average 32 years old, but at any given point can be from 15 to 81. And again, on both ends of that spectrum are folks who can't drive for various reasons, state laws, or they may just have chosen to stop doing that. So again, transit keeps people active through their whole lifespan. There again is the 93% of those who drive, and again, their behavior tells us that many of them have a millennial bias, and they're driving because they have to. Brief indication there of the number of faculty in our metro-wide family, and about 250 staff as well. So again, we could stand in for a number of institutions, but because these are primarily students who are working and going to school as well, they don't have a sort of a cloistered, set-apart life. Their life in school is like it was before and as it will be when they graduate. So they're a good reflection of the population at large and would benefit from transit investment. And with that, I'll turn it back to Lori. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. Keep those cards filling out, and we'll be collecting them shortly here, but we have one more presenter, Dave Van Hatten. Dave, I know Dave from the Capitol, and I'm hoping Dave's going to give us a little Capitol perspective. His title is Advocacy Director for Transit for Livable Communities. That means he's a lobbyist, folks. And he's the chair of a major coalition that has come into being this year to fight the transportation battle at the legislature. That coalition is called Transportation Forward. Dave, you have served as a transit representative on the Metropolitan Council's Transit Advisory Board since 2011. He is steeped in this issue. Tell us what's going on at the Capitol, Dave.
See if I can place this in here. This is only two. So we started this conversation with a very good question that Lori asked all of us, and that is, are we ready? Let me know if you can't hear me. Are we ready? And what you've heard thus far are some really, really great projects that are queued up in terms of transit, in terms of roads and bridges. I would add we have the same kind of needs in terms of bike and pedestrian in the metro and across the state. but we're not ready until the legislature, this session, which ends on May 23rd, passes long-term comprehensive transportation funding. And we'll get into a little more details of the how and what that looks like, but just a little bit of, if you can move through the slides here, I'm with Transit for Livable Communities. We're about making the transit, the bus and the rail, the biking and the walking easier for people to use. We also believe in fixing our roads and bridges, but the way you get that done is at the legislature. So we formed a major coalition called Transportation Forward. Last year, some of you may have heard of Move Min. This is a continuation. And we're about showing the political will to get that long-term comprehensive funding done. Next slide. I'm going to go through these very quickly. We're over 50 organizations, all types, community, labor, business, environment, social justice. Many of the sponsors tonight are part of the coalition, and we appreciate their work and their collaboration. So you've heard, I think, many good reasons for why we need to invest in transportation. I'm going to give you my top 5. Maintaining our roads and bridges. Nearly half the roads and bridges are 50 years old. That's about the useful life of our roads and bridges. So we need to fix our roads and bridges. We need to expand those transit options, as you've heard from all the speakers. One factoid to remember, in the metropolitan area, only 15% of jobs currently are conveniently available by transit. So that's hurting all of us, but it's particularly hurting people who can't afford a car. So this is about access to opportunity, expanding that access to everyone, and making smart investments. So the third reason we invest is because when we invest in transit and roads and bridges, the academics tell us, or the researchers tell us, that we get $3 of direct economic benefit for every dollar invested. On the transit side, building out the system of transit ways, which you'll see in a moment, that $3 of benefit, the majority of it is reduced traffic delays for everyone. That 85% of the large percentage of people that are driving are the primary beneficiaries. Obviously, people on buses and trains benefit, but that's an important takeaway. This is an investment that is good for everyone in the region. Fourth is emissions. We know on a passenger mile basis that people riding transit emit about half the greenhouse gas emissions and an even smaller, much smaller fraction of smog producing emissions. And then finally, safety. I sat in on the Senate hearing yesterday on the crash report from MnDOT, and it's horrible news. And we can't, this transportation bill that we need to pass won't prevent all those tragedies, but it can go a long way. So those are the 5 reasons. Let's move to the how. I'm going to have to, we're getting there. I'll just talk and we'll see if it aligns. So our proposal is very much like the Senate bill that passed last year. So to get this done, we need gas tax increase, possibly tab fees. We need those sources that are dedicated to roads and bridges, have served us well in the past. That's the way to go to fix our roads and bridges. In the Metro, similarly, we build on the quarter-cent Metro sales tax. We passed in 08. We passed another 3 quarters so we can build out the system that you'll see in a moment. We have plans to fund the Senate bill, our agenda, funds transit and biking and pedestrian in greater Minnesota as well. And I can get into those details later. I think I'll wait so I make the time limit here. Can I get to the why the 3 quarters? So one of the things that we're very attuned to is that Governor Dayton and the business community, local chambers, have a very strong position for increasing transit, but they're talking about a half-cent Metro sales tax increase. We're with the Senate because here's what 3/4 cent allows you to do. One, we don't just grow transit ways, we grow the bus system, which really hasn't grown in 10 years. We ensure that there's funding for bicycling and walking connections. Those are the fastest growing modes. We heard about the millennials changing. That's growing the fastest. We need to put state money there as well. And then finally, having 3/4 cent gives us assurance that we can tell the whole region that there's an equitable set of projects that will get done in a reasonable amount of time. When you're relying on half the capital costs coming from the federal government, it's good to have a little cushion. So probably shouldn't use that word cushion, but the idea is that at 3/4 cent, we have a plan that addresses all the modes and gets things done in a timely fashion as the public would expect. So I have a similar map of transit ways. This is the whole system in the region. 3 light rails would be added. 7 highway bus rapid transit, and 10 rapid bus. And again, we can get into more detail on some of these, but the bus piece is really, really critical in terms of reaching all the people who need to get where they need to go. My next slide is focusing on the East Metro. I think Jan covered this well, but I'm going to ask you a quick question. What percentage do you think of Washington County residents leave their county to go to work? 75? That's a good guess. So it's 2/3. So one thing I just encourage people to think about wherever I speak on this topic is, yes, East Metro has very pressing needs, but when we build out a system, there's needs across the metro, and those drivers who are driving across the metro, leaving their county, this is true in almost every county in the metro, a majority leaving their county, they benefit when transit takes cars off the road. Next slide is the Met Transit Service Improvement Program, so you sort of see what those bus routes look like in green. Again, we have a great plan on the books. Met Transit has crafted this over the last couple of years with the suburban transit providers. It's ready to go. We just need to pass the legislation. And the final slide is, again, showing the importance of safe connections for biking and walking. So I just want to conclude with the urgency. We have a situation with the legislature where both parties and both bodies have put proposals on the table. And we've raised, all of us as a public, have raised transportation as a priority, and those legislators have all agreed and said it is a top priority. So they need to hear from all of us every day till May 23rd that priorities need to be addressed and that there's a place of compromise. We're completely believe in those dedicated funding sources like the gas tax and like the sales tax, but there is room for compromise to get this done and make significant progress on this issue that affects all of us in so many ways. So I'll just wrap with one last thing, which is on Monday, April 4th, the afternoon of Monday, April 4th, we're having Transportation Forward Day at the Capitol. And boy, it would be great if all of you showed up. We will schedule meetings with your legislators. We're doing that with folks around the state. We will have a large presence. We are working in a broader coalition with both Progress in Motion and with business interests. This issue is too important to delay, and as many have said, costs only go up when we delay. Thank you.
Dave, you mean it's not going to take a bridge collapse this time to get this done? Let's have those cards collected with the questions from this audience. And while they do that, I'll ask a bit about two specific parts of the transportation conversation that seem to have the most electricity at the Capitol. Those two issues being a gas tax increase and the expansion of light rail, the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project, the extension of the Green Line. Those two things seem to attract the most heat and maybe not enough light, but certainly the most heat at the Capitol. I'd like to ask this panel to help us understand why that is and whether they think that we can get past the opposition, the impediment that those two issues, gas tax increase and the extension of the Green Line, represent. Maybe I should pick on Roger to start with because he's the business guy here, and some of that resistance to a gas tax increase has come from the business community.
Well, I'm afraid I'm a better expert on the Gateway Corridor than I am on funding sources, but I think the kind of historical debate has been between designated funds for this as opposed to broader resources. And obviously the gas tax increase adds to the cost for the business community and doing their business to a greater degree than perhaps a general income tax increase might or something of that sort. I think the challenge as we look at sources for all funding is figuring out where does the benefit accrue? Is it exclusively to the people that are using that particular mode of transportation, or is it to our society at large? And I guess I'm one who believes that we all benefit by encouraging a multimodal approach to looking at transportation and should look at it as more of a community benefit. in my perspective anyway. So.
Well, then, let me press you just a bit on that point. If we do use general fund resources for transportation, some voices at the Capitol will say, but then you're taking money away from the purposes that the general fund is now used for, which would include education, healthcare, public safety. What about that argument? Are you hurting something else in order to improve transportation if you do that?
As one who worked in healthcare for 38 years, I assure you that I understand full well that every time we shift funds from one use to another, that we are hurting some other part of our economy, unfortunately, and oftentimes it's funding education at the cost of healthcare, or taking designated funds that were accrued for healthcare purposes through things like the provider tax and using them for other purposes in the general fund purposes. So I'm really going to kind of bow out of that question a little bit. I think I have all the respect in the world for those people that sit at the table every day and try and wrestle with these questions, because they're pretty complicated in terms of where all the various sources come from. And the fact of the matter is, none of us want to pay any more taxes, but we all want our roads fixed. We want to not have to deal with delays in getting our commute every day, and we want the best health care and education we can get. And it's a tough political challenge that's playing out in our presidential debates as we speak. So I don't have the answer.
Does anybody else on the panel want to comment on the opposition to gas tax increase and to the extension of the Green Line?
Well, I'll take those in order. I think gas tax is wrapped up in the bigger conversation about taxes, but I really, frankly, don't understand the opposition. Gas is remarkably cheap right now. If somehow, and I'm not suggesting this, but if government put in a 10-cent gas tax, no one would even notice. It's about $2 to $3 a week per commuter. Again, if we can have people seeing that cost and the benefits, I think most people agree we should responsibly maintain our roads and bridges. I mean, sort of the basic concept of responsibility and passing on, fixing the system that was built for us. So we can get into more of the politics on the gas tax. I would say on Southwest, some similar positioning, hopefully, that yes, it has a large price tag, but the benefits have been clearly shown. Every community along the line supports it. Every chamber along the line supports it. As we saw in Jan's map, if we don't get the federal share for half of the capital costs, Dallas, Phoenix, Denver, there's a dozen cities that will happily take that investment. And it's just a project that's right for the region. It's the best thing for a fast-growing part of the region. It's part of that system that we talked about. And the state needs to put 10% into the capital costs. The other parties have done their work, County's Transit Improvement Board, the individual counties. So, I think we can at least get one out of two, but hopefully get both of those done.
Yeah, we introduced other elected officials who were here earlier, but I want to acknowledge that State Senator Susan Kent has arrived. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Perhaps you'd like to get involved in the conversation at some point, and if you would, just raise your hand, and that goes for the others at that table as well. Jan, maybe you can help us think about and understand more about that resistance to rail. You've got on your planning agenda bus, rapid transit, and the potential for some rail down the road. How do you decide, and what about that resistance to light rail? What's that all about?
That's a great question. We talk a lot about right-sizing transit for the community, and a lot of that is looking at the ridership that's projected for the corridor. In fact, one of our neighborhood meetings in Oakdale just 2 weeks ago was on this topic, and the Gateway Corridor has put that entire presentation and talk online on the Gateway Corridor website. So if you'd like to really dive into ridership and how we calculate it and how we think about it, that's a great sort of long story or long answer to your question. And so for some corridors like Gateway and Red Rock, Bus rapid transit is the right sized type of transit for the corridor, and it's bringing all the same benefits at a slightly lower cost. For other corridors like the Southwest LRT, and I'm not an expert in that corridor, but I think their ridership is on upwards of 35,000 riders per day. It's much more comparable to the Green Line, which is even higher than that. When you're looking at that as a cost per rider, light rail is the right sized transit for that corridor. And you really want to have, and it can move more people. Light rail can move more people. And so you really want to have the right sized transit for that full regional transit system, so it's all working together and kind of seamlessly, and you can transfer from mode to mode with very, very little difficulty. And I think the City of Eden Prairie, I just saw it today, just produced a great video on the importance of Southwest LRT to their community, and it is, as Dave said, it's much more than moving, transit, or, as FTA will say, butts and seats. It is about a regional economic benefit, and their video, I encourage you to go check it out, really speaks to why this investment is important to that particular city.
Well, and it does seem like we focus a lot on individual, on the micro side of this, the siting of individual lines, get all excited about the Kenilworth corridor in Minneapolis, and don't think enough about the system. I was pleased that several of you brought system maps to show Minnesotans that we're trying to do something rather big here, and one little stretch and one line isn't the whole story at all. Dave, there's a question from somebody in our audience I'd like to put to you about the choice that has been made at the Capitol to use the sales tax for transit funding rather than the gas tax, which this writer says seems to be more related to transportation. Give us a little history. Why is the gas tax dedicated to roads and bridges but can't be used for transit?
Well, the why is that it's in the Minnesota Constitution, and I'm looking to my colleague out there, Jim Urkel. I don't recall the exact year, but it's been 50, close to many, many years that Minnesotans decided that transportation and the use of a gas tax as a user fee, the users pay in and they get the benefit, is defined as highway purpose. So while there's a little bit of room for interpretation, it's never been and never will be interpreted as money that can go to transit, to public transit, either light rail or buses. So if anyone tells you that, we can show you a chapter and verse in the Minnesota Constitution. It's highway purpose. I think the metro sales tax, I have it in my folder here, but it's an approach that works. Again, we did the quarter cent in 08. I have a handout here. Pretty much every peer around the country that is outperforming us and building a transit system, they do it with a metro sales tax. It aligns with the geography of transit. It aligns with kind of the economic benefit. It's very administratively efficient, and so that's the tool that we should use. We don't need to look for another one.
It is the tool that other metropolitan areas use as well, right?
Absolutely. So we have something called the pennies brief, and I'll break it out here, but 10, 12 metropolitan areas around the country also use a sales tax. That's the preferred method of funding transit expansion.
Several of our audience members are interested in how transit, as you envision it, is going to be truly serving seniors. Yes, they acknowledge there may be more non-drivers among the senior population, more who prefer not to drive or who just have been advised they should not drive any longer. But if they live a mile or two away from the envisioned Gold Line, how will this serve them? And what really is envisioned to help seniors in Washington County as they try to age in place? Jan, I think that's one for you to start with.
It's another great question, and what we didn't talk much about in our presentation, although Dave touched on it, was a connecting bus or feeder bus service that would connect with the Gateway Corridor, the Red Rock Corridor, so that you would be able to take a bus that's much closer to your home if you're 1 or 2 miles off the corridor, that would bring you to a Gateway Corridor station and then provide you with that quicker trip to your destination. We've seen in other parts of the country and other parts of our region too, that some senior facilities run a shuttle to and from the station. That's something else that we'll be looking at. And through a grant that Washington County just received from the Metropolitan Council and MnDOT, we're beginning a study called, we're calling community transportation, which is specifically looking at the senior population and how it could better be served in Washington County, what the needs are and what the gaps are, because, and Commissioner White can attest to this, we're hearing from more and more people that simply are stuck and they either no longer can drive or they would prefer not to drive, yet they don't have any options. And so it's going to be something that the county is looking very closely at. We've also recently looked at a study from AARP that says that transit is one of the top needs of seniors, so we're taking some cues from that. So I think there's going to be more to come in this area, but there's going to be connections to these main transit corridors that we highlighted tonight that will provide what is often called the last mile connection. And that's not just for seniors, but for anyone who might be living off the corridor.
Well, it occurs to me, I want to be sure Tom can stay in this conversation. It occurs to me that you may have seen at Metropolitan State some benefit from the Green Line, even though you're not on the Green Line. Am I right about that?
That's right. Our students come from all over. As it happens, 70% of our students come from within the city limits of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So a lot of folks are concentrated along that line. We're also part of the Central Corridor Anchor Partnership, which is a group of primarily medical institutions and higher education institutions working to increase job readiness and livability and residence along the Green Line for people so they can live near where they work and so forth. So we have students coming from all points of the compass, and it's increased business, commerce, and so forth. So we feel a lot of the spillover from that.
Here's a question for those of you who are working on the Gold Line. Will the Gold Line's availability lead to more parking by people from other places into residential areas close to that Gold Line? Or will parking be provided in park and ride type lots to alleviate that pressure? What's the planning around parking for those who choose to use the Gold Line?
That's a really, really important question. So the 13 stations for Gold Line, some will have a park and ride facility. In fact, one of the locations for a park and ride is right here at Guardian Angels. Maybe many of you are familiar that it currently serves express bus park and riders, but it could potentially be a station for the Gateway corridor too. This is an issue where we can really learn from corridors that have come before us, such as the Blue Line and the Green Line. They put those neighborhoods, those cities put strict parking policies in place around station locations where they didn't want people parking on the residential streets, so that if you didn't have the appropriate permit in your vehicle, you couldn't park there. You'd get a ticket, you would get towed. We have had conversations with the city of Oakdale about doing that in the station, if there's to be a station near Helmo Avenue here, just up the road. So there's tools and there's sort of regulations that can be put in place to protect neighborhoods. That's something that the cities would more likely take the lead on than the counties. But also, as part of studying ridership in the corridor, we look very closely at the number of walk-ups and the number of drivers that are projected for each station, so that we can encourage the location of parking facilities, such as here at Garden Angels or Sunray Parking Shopping Center is another park and ride location in the Gateway Corridor, so that we can have places for people to park, so they're not in competition with the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I would just point out too that during this process of the Gateway Corridor planning, there's been a health impact assessment process undertaken, and it created some very vibrant conversation about how do we establish these modes or these nodes along the Gateway Corridor to not be a detriment to the community, not just a big parking ramp, but instead actually an asset, something that could include some other community space, parkland, and that sort of thing around it, so that it really contributed to the health of our community rather than somehow being a detriment. I would just point out too that we're also in the process of doing strategic planning for transportation, that each of your communities is also involved in updating comprehensive plans in the very near term as well. And it's another tremendous opportunity to have a voice in how does our community evolve, what are the important challenges that we face, and how do we plan for those for the next 10 years. And I would just encourage you to keep your ears to the ground in terms of when the sessions are being held for that particular planning as well.
It sounds like something I just wrote about regarding the city of Eagan and a planning process it has undertaken, but I think it sounds like the kind of planning process these East Metro communities are doing as well. Those communities were designed in the 20th century as car-centric, car-oriented communities. Now they have to become people-oriented communities, and it's a different way to think about what facilities are offered. Here's another question about gateway siting. If Gateway is all about workers and jobs, why is the proposal avoiding high-density areas in Woodbury? Is that true?
Well, Woodbury's actually, and Oakdale, haven't defined the alignment in their community. So recently you may have heard that the city of Lake Elmo had decided not to host the Gateway Corridor. The cities of Woodbury and Oakdale are actually looking at that as a new opportunity for them. So we've just started, those conversations, and Woodbury has many great ideas, as does Oakdale. So that's why that first map, or the map on the cover of this brochure, the arrow, really east of 494, 694 doesn't define where the corridor goes. And those are conversations that are going to be happening over the next month or next several months through the end of 2016. And so I think it's too soon to say that Woodbury is not planning for the Gateway Corridor to reach denser neighborhoods or denser areas in their community, because that hasn't been determined.
I'd just point out, as a resident of Woodbury and somebody who served on the Economic Development Commission for a number of years, that where that particular station is planned is in what was at one time called the Northeast Business Park, and then the Red Rock development. And it really is intended to be a very substantial future commercial and retail and industrial sort of development. And so it's not like we need to plat that thing in the middle of some place where there's already all this business. I mean, it will serve, in fact, as a catalyst for additional development in the community, which is part of the reason why we want to do these things. It's to help to further enhance development, not just to serve the existing development.
Well, that is exactly the point that one of our questioners wanted you to address. There's sort of a chicken and egg concern. Should the point of transit planning to be to encourage density and discourage urban sprawl, or should transit serve to try to serve existing density? As you think about that, what's the relationship between transit and the locus of population that we call density? Dave, you want to talk about that? Dave Van Hatten?
Sure. So I would encourage people to take a look at that service improvement program that Metro Transit has done. It's one of my slides. And also CTIP's planning in terms of transit ways. So we generally build transit where there's the most people. That's the way we do it all over the world. So the answer is yes to both parts. So we build it to serve an existing population, but we also build it in really key places where we can increase density. So the green line between Minneapolis and St. Paul has seen $3 billion of new development. The red line, which is a southern extension of the Hiawatha, or the blue line, which is bus rapid transit, much like the gold line, has seen $275 million of development. So we want to plan on the land use side in a way that we can increase development so that more seniors can live there, the young people can live there, can really, and that actually captures another really important benefit of the trains, which is really smart technology that can add capacity. So some days you'll see the Green Line has 2 cars. We can run more trains and add cars and really serve a growing population with rail, but that's why the bus is also so critical too. A transit planner will tell you there's a trade-off between productivity and sort of equity coverage, that we want to be super productive in terms of ridership, but there's also people that depend on transit. So we need to cover the metropolitan area, as we do to some degree, but we need to get that funding to build out the system, rail, bus, biking and walking connections as well.
Well, thanks for mentioning biking and walking, because we have several questions here from folks about bike trails, about how, whether they are being coordinated as they are being planned, and how that is happening, what funding impediments there might be for bike trails in Washington County. Who's knowledgeable about bike trails in Washington County? Jan, is that you? And talk a bit about the increased usage of bike trails too, please.
We've seen a great increase in bike trail usage in Washington County, both for recreation and for commuting. You may know the Browns Creek Trail opened last summer. It connects the Gateway Trail to downtown Stillwater. It's a beautiful new trail, and it's a very much a part of the planning we do at the county. In fact, the comprehensive plan update that I spoke about, that Roger just mentioned, the cities will be undertaking, part of that's going to be a bike and pedestrian plan, and we'll be looking for public input on that. If there's bike trails that you're looking for in your community, that's information and input that we need to know. As far as how it connects with some of the transit way systems, the health impact assessment that Roger mentioned, we are, the transit stations will be as strong as the connections to them in many ways, and so we're looking for bike and pedestrian connections to those stations, and that's something that the federal partners and the county's transit improvement board partners that are funding the project, that's something that is included as part of the project costs. But again, we're early in the planning stages, so we're really at this point looking for input.
Okay, very good. As an employer, Roger, did you see while you were working at Health East, and have you seen since then an increase in bike commuting?
Well, there's no question it's increasing. I was at the Surly Brewery for lunch the other day, and there's like 150 bike racks there, I think. Maybe, I don't know what this is about bike riders, but they like beer. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, definitely there's, again, it's the millennial generation that's having a significant impact on that, but it's also a number of us seniors that are recognizing that as we're putting on the years, that exercise and maybe considering walking to the store or riding the bike instead of jumping in that car might be a smarter move for more reasons than just saving a little bit of money on gas. And I think in Woodbury in particular, I know there was testimony at the hearing around Gateway Corridor from some of the bike clubs talking about how Woodbury actually has just lots and lots of miles of bike trails. They're not always designed to get you from point A to point B as well as they might be, and the importance of their being connected to the ultimate bus rapid transit stations as those are designed. So I think those are going to be golden opportunities as the design of those stations takes place with a lot of community input, and as we continue to update our comprehensive plan, that we'll see a lot more discussion about that taking place going forward.
I bet you see a lot more biking at Metropolitan State too, don't you, Tom?
We're on connected to the St. Paul's new roundabout system, and if our students who live in the neighborhood bike quite a bit, and we need to put in more racks for them. Again, some, like we were hearing before, many cross counties on their daily commute, so it's a real mixed bag for us.
Now, Tom, if I can, just stay with you and keep this microphone, because there's a question that I think pertains to the attitudes of the millennial generation, which you probably see a fair amount on your campus. The suggestion is that young people's attitudes about buses might not be all that we're saying that they are, that this questioner says, I see mainly empty school buses in high school parking lots while those parking lots are packed with cars. Are these young people growing up to be bus-averse adults in our high schools here in the metropolitan area? What do you think about that, Tom?
I have a lot of experience with a high school where the cars of the students were nicer than the teachers too. I think that's a special case because there won't, many homes are close enough to the school and not on arterials. You wouldn't expect city bus traffic there, and if they're after school activities, sports and so forth, or jobs, a lot of students might not want to get on the yellow bus. And there's the cool factor too, right, when you're 16. But I don't think that extrapolates to life after high school. Again, certainly my son who takes the train all the time, he'll go north to downtown Minneapolis on a regular city bus to get the light rail to the airport, rather out of his way, but again, that's not as more important to him than taking the car and saving a little time. So I think there's a generational bias toward transit when it works.
Now you can pass that microphone to Dave. We have a number of questions here about specific projects. And I've got one that isn't on these cards. Jan's comments about the 494, 694, 94 interchange and its needs, and the fact that it's not on anybody's planning list, made me think about an even more expensive interchange in the metro area that's being discussed at the state capitol this year, Dave, and that's the 494 35W interchange in Bloomington. Some of the legislators in that area are saying that it's time for the legislature to start specifically funding projects like that, rather than waiting for MnDOT to get around to it on some planning list. Do you think that's a good approach, Dave, since you're one who lobbies on these questions? And should that be the approach in the East Metro for the big interchange that Jan mentioned, the 694, 494, 94 big interchange that's just a short distance from where we're gathered here tonight?
It's a tough one. With all due respect to legislators, I think the system that we have now, which is that we generally don't earmark specific projects. We have MnDOT with professionals and lots of people study this very closely and look at both maintenance need and expansion needs. And I recall at least that 494 35W has sort of a scaled down version, which is often what we're doing because it's a very smart move because travel, overall car travel, even when the population has increased, has not increased. It's been flat. And so our coalition isn't saying that there should be no expansion of roads anywhere, but we should be looking carefully at those investments. And so I think MnDOT has a fairly good track record with this, and I think that they're certainly attuned to local interests and projects. So I think that's the quick answer.
Send the microphone back down to the other end of the table. Here's a question about growth in southern Washington County. Another bridge is needed, it says here, between Woodbury on 494 and Hastings. Are there any plans to improve the 494-61 interchange and bridge crossing? Do you know of such a thing, Jan?
494 and 61. A bridge crossing where the Wakota Bridge is?
I'm not familiar with that stretch of highway, but it says another bridge is needed in this questioner's mind between Woodbury and Hastings. Are there plans to make any improvements in that area?
I'm not aware of any plans, but if the person who asked the question would be interested in chatting with me afterwards, I would like to learn more about their perspective.
Okay, and then here's another question about a specific spot here. What will it take to get a bridge back over 35E for the Gateway Trail? Does anyone know why that wasn't included in the corridor's redesign? What do we know about that?
The Gateway Bike Trail over 35E.
35E. I don't know, it doesn't say bike trail, just a bridge back over 35E. I imagine it would serve bikes and other vehicles. Oh, pardon me, over the Gateway, it does say Gateway Trail.
Okay, so
Yes.
it is
Okay,
gets
it is
confusing.
Gateway
We have
Trail.
the Gateway Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit.
Yes.
We also have the Gateway Trail.
I'm sorry, I
the
misread
bike
that.
Trail.
Yes.
I guess I've been with Washington County for a little over 2 years. I'm not sure on the history of why I know it drops down. It follows the Vento Trail into St. Paul, and why there isn't an additional, bridge over 35 yet. I have to look into that. I don't know if maybe Dave knows.
So between Jan and I, we can get you an answer to that. I've heard some conversation about that. I think it was, there's a way for bicyclists to make that path. Things changed a bit as the whole 35 highway project shifted. So we can get you the details between Jan and I. And I just wanted to add one thing about the road and bridge projects. Really, none of us that's our focus, but Governor Dayton's plan, which was put forward last year and included the equivalent of a 16-cent gas tax increase. If you go to their website, they list projects in every county in the state that are really hanging in the balance. And there's 12 road and bridge projects in Washington County, and happy to point those, share that information as well. But if you go to the governor's website, you'll see what's at stake.
Dave, keep the microphone there. A number of our questioners are asking for some more details about what goes wrong at the state capitol, why this is so hard. They want some more analysis from you about, with the case as strong as we've heard it tonight, why is it such a slog to get the legislature to move on transportation funding?
Well, I mean, I'm impatient. I think that they should act this session. I recall the work in '08 that was progress but didn't get the job done. So some of it's just finishing the job. But, you know, there are competing interests. I would just remind people that the transportation conversation is about funding sources that don't have to compete with those other interests. So that's why we can and should get this done. You know, you all follow the politics as much as I do. Someone said no one wanted to pay a tax. Well, I do want to pay those taxes. You know, it's on your receipt. How many people have noticed the 0.25% sales tax on a receipt in the metropolitan area that allowed us to build the Green Line and transform how we do transit and give us the ability to build out a system? Like, nobody's losing huge sleep over that small contribution. We just have to keep the frame about what gets done rather than the taxes. And so you all are the ambassadors, because the democracy does work in Minnesota and around the country. If legislators hear from you, they can get this done this session. And again, Andrea, our TLC organizer, has all the details on Transportation Forward Lobby Day. So we're as strong as our people power is strong. And we are reaching out. We were on a media tour around the state. We know to do this, you need the votes across the state. So talk to your relatives, talk to your friends, and we can get this done in 2016.
Anybody
And
have anything to add?
legislators.
Anything to add to those comments about what's the impediment and how we break through it?
We should ask our legislators.
Well, I think it's actually a nice segue to the concluding remarks. Thank you, panel, for a very interesting evening. I'm going to invite to the microphone now Mike Manor. Mike works with, and I'm sorry, my notes have disappeared here, so I've lost the note that tells me who you work with. But in any event, the question has been put to us, how do we get through to these legislators? And I think you have some ideas for us tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And thank you all of you for coming tonight. Let me get around the cables and wires and strings here. We are the River Valley Action, and this is about action. And we've had some good planning discussion with our planners, you know, trying to think about how do we improve the bridge from how we communicate with our legislators, our elected officials. We've got 3 possibilities for you tonight to make contact. We have these white cards that we've pre-scripted for you. Is it Jerry? Jerry, did you put these together? Or Becky put these together? Which have the mail-in on the back. This is kind of more of our traditional approach to communicating with our elected officials. Makes sense. I don't have any other things. Are there any questions on the front, what we're trying to accomplish? Do we know, can we define paratransit first, I guess?
I can take that question. That is a really important need in Washington County, and I really glossed over it in the Q&A. The study, so paratransit is it's like Metro Mobility or Transit Link, Dial-A-Ride. It's sort of an individual, so you call up transit service, it would come to your doorstep and take you where you need to go, and depending on the service, they operate in different times a day and just serve different populations. And so it's one of the more expensive modes of transit, but yet it fills a very critical need, because you're right, Washington County is a very diverse, going from urban to rural, large geographic area. So the grant that I mentioned very briefly that we received from the Metropolitan Council and MnDOT, we're calling it community transportation. It will look at paratransit, but will look at other types of transit in the county as well, to identify what the needs are and what the gaps are, and put together more or less a long-term strategic plan on how to fill that out. But that paratransit service that you ask about is the fastest growing cost that Metro Transit and Metropolitan Council. And building out the regional transit system will take some of the pressure off of that service, but it's increasing because as people age, they have more limitations on their driving ability and particularly driving at night. And so it's something that as a county, the county board is very seriously looking at and will be doing even more so in the coming year as we begin this study.
Again, a round for Lori in our panel this evening. Thank you all very much. And lastly, the cards. Jerry's asked that he's got a basket back there for you if you want to add them to his collection basket. So drive safe, have a good drive home, or walk safe, and have a good night. Thank you.